It's a magical, mystical time. It's anecdotal adventures.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Anecdotal Adventures Reads Worm. I'm your host, Ashley, and this is my co-host.
I'm Cassidy.
And today we read Arc 9, Sentinels. Last time on Worm and Arc 8, Extermination, I believe, an Endbringer attacked. And to say a lot happened would be an underestimation. It was our longest episode we recorded, I'm pretty sure.
Oh yeah, we had quite a bit to talk about.
We had a lot to say about that episode.
Don't tell me I was wrong. Someone tried to argue, someone mentioned something in the comments. I don't think it was the last recording, but the video before that, and they're like, give him a chance. He'll surprise you. Didn't surprise me. I was right.
Well, guess what, Cassidy? I hate to just point you, but we're on Arc 9 of, 28.
I know. Maybe in the
we
future.
Have literally millions of words to go.
So far, unsurprised, not proven wrong. I'll eat my words if he does change, but...
You're feeling vindicated right now, is what you're saying.
Oh, yeah.
But we're just going to hop right into it. Arc 9, Sentinels, is awards. It's a series of interludes from the perspective of all the wards. Structurally, I think Rob Bowe did a really smart thing. In the first two chapters are from the outsiders, the two outsiders, the new members of the wards, Weld and Flechette. So, sort of gives you perspective on them from an outsider's perspective, and we haven't really seen from them in quite a while, the wards specifically. I checked, their last interlude was interlude 3.
Oh, so 6 arcs ago?
Yeah, so it's been a hot minute since we've checked in with our poor traumatized wards. Also, I found a fun piece of fan art, but I didn't find who'd drew it, but it was of Clock Blocker with bug spray and warding off Taylor.
Warding off Taylor.
Boom.
Thank you very much.
And I just thought that was lovely. I can't wait till we get later into the story so I can start showing you more of the fan art.
More of the fan art, yeah.
Yeah, because a lot of it is spoilerific, but it's so good. Anyway, 9.1, we open with Weld as our point of view character, I suppose. Weld was originally a member of the Boston wards. He led the Boston wards. And because there were 3 members of the wards that died in the Leviathan attack, which isn't great. We talked about Galliot. We forgot to mention Aegis at all, because he's another one of the characters that we'd met and talked to. I reread Interlude 3 in prep for this, and I was like, Aegis was great. Why didn't we miss him more? He was the guy whose power made him really hard to injure or kill.
But we also mostly talked about Galliot because Vista, I think, was the character's name. We found those interactions adorable. Was I wrong? Am I wrong?
Vista and Galliot are cute, yeah.
Yeah, we found that interaction adorable, which is why we're caught up on Galliot.
Yeah, but also, Galliot does have more connections to people outside the wards. Galliot is Glory Girl's boyfriend, and had a whole conversation with Amy about that in the end of Interlude 3. But enough about the 3 wards. I'm telling you that the 3 wards died in preparation for this, because Weld comes in expecting... he is intelligent, and he is, socially intelligent, and you can tell he's trying, but he is not, a therapist would hardly be equipped to deal with these traumatized children. But at the beginning of the arc, he arrives and is met at the airport by Director Pigott. However
Pigott.
it's pronounced.
I think it's Pigott because they call her
They call
Piggy.
her Piggy.
So
Yes.
it would make sense if it was Pigott.
Well, I'm going to continue the rest of the episode just calling her Piggy then. It's easier to remember, and I know how that's pronounced. But they have a conversation, a pretty long one. It's a substantial half of the chapter, where they sort of just talk about the state of Brockton Bay and give Weld a rundown on the local teams. So we hadn't actually heard of all the PRT classifications beforehand. I have told you them though because
I scrolled away from it. Here it is.
I have it. It's Mover, Shaker, Brute, and Breaker, Master, Tinker, Blaster, and Thinker, Striker, Changer, Trump, and Stranger. And I also have a nice explanation of why these seem so, like, brusque namings. They were originally meant only for villains before they were extended and became popularized and were established to all capes for PRT classification purposes. Weld himself is a case 53. He appears to be made of all metal. He is slightly magnetic, so things that are metal stick to him. And there's a whole process he talks about for like 3 paragraphs about how he deals with that.
When he talked about shaking people's hand and their rings getting stuck to him, I can imagine someone just slightly less socially intelligent. So just a little bit more awkward trying to deal with that and just not having like enough confidence in social situations to be like, oh no, I don't shake hands. And just letting it happen every time. Because I feel like I would be in that boat. Or I would forget.
Well, they're bringing in Weld and Flechette to bring up the manpower in the Brockton Bay Ward team. But they're also talking in this chapter a little bit about sort of how an Endbringer attack affects a city like Brockton Bay, which was already kind of in a bad place as a city, just in general, with rampant gang activity and deep violence, just everywhere.
People plotting.
But like, there's been looting now. The merchants, who were that gang we made fun of a while back, well, they're a problem now. And Empire 88 may be gone, but unfortunately, it is not forgotten.
Oh, but we're so close.
It is split
So
into
close.
2 fractions now. The Pure and Fenrir's Chosen. Oh boy, the challenge of deciding who are the leaders of these 2 groups. I wonder, is it the guy named Hookwolf and the woman named Purity?
Huh, what a mystery. Well, I guess we'll find out next time.
Well, I mean, these are neo-Nazis and white supremacists, so we can't expect too much of their mental faculties
yeah.
on good days, so the names make sense.
The brain, half functional, you know. I have a little bit of hope for Purity's group. Just a little bit. She's still racist.
And I mean,
But
Kaiser's dead, so her manipulative, abusive ex is no longer in the picture.
And it was made clear that she was actively trying to fight her ignorance. So go her. So I'm holding out a little bit of hope.
But she also recruited all of her friends from that organization as well.
So she's surrounding herself with the bad influences again.
We're just gonna cross our fingers. They set up a lot in the first chapter of things that are going to happen later on in the arc. Specifically, they talk about the new recruit, a Tinker and Mover classification. And we just get a drop here. His inclusion on the local team will help fill in gaps left by the death of Velocity, a local protectorate member, and Arms Master's retirement. Is that what they're calling it now?
Well, I mean, they do the same thing with people who are like in high places in like regular normal companies. If there's like a huge scandal, they're like, let's keep it on the hush hush. You're retiring.
No. Wink, wink.
I know that's what they do for teachers.
I have in my notes, Arms Master's retirement, talk about saving face. He almost broke like a sacred pact that the Capes have to band together to fight monsters that could feasibly destroy the Earth as we know it. That's a pretty big deal.
Yep. Oh, and I can't wait to see what career path Arms Master chooses after this.
We'll find out. I'm sure we'll find out. How many words does the story have? We'll find out.
A couple million.
We'll find out. But we get all the classifications, and we also get all the classifications of the members of the wards and some of the big name villain groups around town. So, just gonna list them off here. So Clock Blocker is a Striker 7, which doesn't surprise me with his power to touch things and freeze them in place. Vista, I think, is the highest classification on the team as a Shaker 8. Kidwin is a Tinker 4. Shadowstalker is a Breaker 3, Stranger 2, and Mover 1. We know all their powers, though, so
yeah,
not hard to guess there. So the merchants, they have 3 capes that we've all met. We met the 3. I'm almost positive that the 3 people who showed up to the meeting before were the 3 capes on the merchants. A Shaker 2, Tinker 2, Mover 3, and Shifter 4. I didn't care to look up to their names. I feel that would be giving them too much credit at this part in the story. We'll probably meet them later again. Millions of words. I'll be reminded eventually.
they remain nameless.
Then the 2 offshoots. So Hookwolf, I think is the only member we get the classifications of, is a Changer 4 and Brute 7. It's decently scary. Purity, from the Pure, is Blaster 8, Mover 4, and then the members of her team, she's a Breaker 9, Shifter 8, Stranger 3, Master 6, and a Master 6. I feel like they go over very lightly the actual 3 main teams that we've been focusing on in the story. Coil's team, the Travelers, and the Undersiders, because they're low down in the PRT's worry, which is worrying, considering we know some things they don't at this point. So we get some reader smugness in here. So Coil's powers are unknown. I think it's very concerning that they don't know Coil's power, but they know they're being infiltrated by Coil, revealed later in the arc. And I'll talk about the implications of that when we get to it, but, like, his power must make infiltrating things much easier. The Travelers have high ratings in their powers, but their crimes are low end, pretty much. Then the Undersiders, 3 master classifications in 1 team. Big old big deal. Only one of whom, it goes on to say, is of any particular concern. Investigations into 2 members have suggested sociopathic tendencies, and if they're channeling their efforts into low-threat activities such as robberies, we can afford to ignore them for the time being.
Wait, does it say which one they were talking about?
No, they're being purposely vague.
So from what we know, well, the ones with sociopathic tendencies, my money is on Rachel and brain is doing the thing again.
It starts with an A. We've been reading this book for like hundreds of thousands of words in.
I want to say Alec, but that's not the name.
No, it is in fact Alec.
It is the name? Okay.
That is Alec. Regent Alec. Rachel, bitch. Come on. Get back into it. I know it's been a bit, but it's not been that long.
And then we have an Alec in the other campaign, so...
Yeah, it's fine. It's confusing.
Yeah.
But, I mean, that has been revealed to us.
Mm-hmm.
But which of them do you think is the one that is of particular concern?
I think it's Taylor, because she's seen English. She has seen Shadow Stalker's face. That is what I was trying to say.
Okay, that makes sense. And then Faultline's crew with the highest classification we've seen so far, a Shaker 12. Would you like to take a gander at who the Shaker 12 is? Oh no.
I cannot recall her name from the last time we heard from Faultline's crew, but she was the younger one. I think she was younger, who was neurodivergent, who had
Labyrinth is her name.
Labyrinth. That was what it was.
I wrote down some quotes from this chapter. There's just Weld talking about his abilities. And specifically, Director Pidgeot asks tells him about his allowance, basically. And he's like, yes, I do in fact eat food and will need that allowance. Wink, wink. Well, he did eat, it was a negligible amount, as he thought there was no real harm done if he pocketed some of that extra money and said he spent it on food. Given that his tongue was made of an alloy and the pleasures of food were a shadow of what they should be, it was only fair that he enjoyed himself in some other way. He knew that some staff back in Boston had caught on, but they hadn't said anything. Director Pidgeot here gave him the vibe that maybe she wouldn't be so cool with it. He'd be more careful until he knew for sure. Which... Again, showing it's leading us to believe that Welt is fairly socially intelligent to lead up to the total flop that is his meeting with the rest of the wards.
But the idea of not being able to enjoy food anymore just hurts me in my foodie soul. Just right there.
Yes, and another part of the conversation that they have is about how the PRT has managed capes and their integration into society. They've started with heroes, now they're starting to push rogues, which are capes that can either be classified as hero or villains, such as Parian, who we meet later. And, I mean, how careful the PRT has had to have been to set all this up and make sure it goes smoothly. I mean, because as far as we know, it has gone smoothly. But as Director Pidgeot said, it was one big corporation with one ad campaign could ruin everything. So they have to be very, very careful. That's my notes on their conversation. The rest of my notes are all concerning. Honestly, I think I just copy and pasted the entire meeting of Weld and the rest of the words into my notes, because, it made me feel some things. And all of them were sadness.
And all of them sadness.
Weld considers whether or not having Pidgeot introduce him would be a good thing or not, and he decides no, it would be terrible, so he goes by himself to introduce him to the rest of the lords. Which, no. But, I mean, that would have been helpful in a normal situation, but the words are these words are overworked and traumatized. So when he walks into the team, observes everyone's tired and haphazard state, and at first, puts it on other things, he hasn't quite realized what's gone on, but, everyone looks like they've been out in the town. Vista has some injury, like some noticeable injuries. And he introduces himself and starts talking, and then throws out the idea of like, oh yes, we'll have to implement new training stuff, and pretty immediately he gets a pretty bad reaction at this. It was hard to say what he'd expected, but surely he should have gotten more of a response than some blank stares and glazed looks. Was it the wrong time for this? Every single one of them looked dog-tired. Clockblocker looked like he was barely managing to stand. Have you seen the situation out there? Clockblocker challenged him. Less than an hour ago, I saved a guy I know from my high school physics class from being dragged into an alley by half a dozen grown men. One of them stuck him with a needle before I got him away from them. The hospitals are shut down or over capacity, so I brought him here. He's upstairs right now getting drugs to ensure he doesn't have HIV. Clockblocker went on. Kidwin and I stopped some lunatics in gas masks from mixing ammonia and bleach into poisoned gas. You know why? They want to off the people in an apartment block so they could loot the place and stay there. There's people going fucking crazy out there, and you're talking training? You're assuming it's going to pass, Shadowstalker replied, her voice tired. Some are saying that this is the way things are going to stay. I almost agree with them. This isn't the kind of city that bounces back from things. Pull a 15-hour patrol out there, then come back and talk to me about hope, Clockblocker spoke. You know, I could almost play along, go with the blind optimism, say yippee to training, but you don't even mention the guy you're replacing. A few words from the dead. It's a matter of respect, bro. When he storms off. And man, oh man, it just makes me sad.
I feel bad for both parties involved.
I feel bad for Weld.
Yeah.
He was very unprepared for what he was walking into, like how the state of the city would have affected the state of the team. I feel like he almost didn't consider that, which just because he saw the state of the city going, and the airport was closed because of looting.
Yeah.
He walked through it, but it just sort of didn't click in his head. Like when he was considering the team and where their injuries and why they looked tired was coming from, it didn't click in his head. So he continued to say some wrong things and like promote optimism and like standing strong, but these are people who have been battered down and have continued to be battered down since pretty much the start of the story. So,
yeah, at this point they just wanted a pat on the back, permission to take a nap.
They don't need
some condolences.
They didn't need a pep talk. That's not what they were in for. But Clockblocker goes back out to check on his family. Kidwin goes to manage the console. This is a little thing that I wanted to point out here, because it stood out to me the first time I was reading through, and I was reading as I was going on. Vista glanced at Weld, then asked, "Where do you guys need me?" "Go sleep," Shadowstalker spoke, placing a hand on Vista's head as she walked past the girl. "I'll start my patrol. Go with Clock, make sure he gets home and has some backup. You can relieve me when I'm back, maybe get Clockblocker to go with you." "Thank you." Vista's voice piped up with a definite note of relief. Helplessly, Weld watched as the team split up to go their separate ways, Kidwin sitting down at the far end of the computer station, Shadowstalker and Clockblocker heading up for the elevator. "I fucked up. I already lost them," Weld spoke, mostly to himself. "No, they're just tired," Vista spoke from beside him, "and not just from lack of sleep. You'll see what I mean. You could have mentioned Aegis, Browbeat, and Galliant, but you can't be blamed if Clockblocker didn't give you the time to get around to it. Nobody's really in the mood for speeches." "Right," Weld replied, feeling lost. "They're the ones who died?" Vista gave him a look that could only be described as pity. "You didn't even learn their names?" "Never mind what I just said." "Yeah, you fucked up." It made me feel bad because Weld literally just got here. Dr. Pidgeot spent all the time in their conversation briefing him on the villain teams that he needed to know about. Yeah. Not the team dynamics, because there's no way in hell Director Pidgeot knows enough about the team dynamics to give a good summary.
She should have mentioned, but she should have mentioned the 3 dead members.
So, absolutely. But it's put Weld off at such a disadvantage in this conversation. But another thing I wanted to note is that we'll find out why this is happening later, but in the beginning, like the end of chapter 1 and the beginning of chapter 2, Shadowstalker almost seems nice. We're almost tricked into thinking that Taylor's perspective was just limited. And then it comes to the end of chapter 2, and then we get to Shadowstalker's perspective and like what happens with Vista later, and you're like, oh, never mind. Taylor's right.
Oh my god. Like, yeah, I definitely almost bought it because she was like, go to sleep, pat, pat, which is a very big sister move. But
yeah, and then she has like a fun interaction in the beginning with Flechette later after almost shooting him with a tranquilizer dart about how they're both crossbow aficionados. And that was almost a passable social interaction.
Yeah, 100%. I was like, oh, ha ha ha.
Yeah, because we've just been introduced to how tired and like paranoid the team is. So like, sorry, a little twitchy is a good excuse.
Yeah, definitely in the beginning of the chapter, I was hoping that maybe Shadowstalker's attitude was a peers thing and that it was the people she hung out with at school.
We find out that's not the case.
No, very much not the case.
Not the case, but I am absolutely positive this is done on purpose.
Oh, yeah.
Because we end with the revolution that Shadowstalker is Sophia in the last arc. And like takes the rug out of you, makes you think, oh, the wards, it makes you think less of the wards because Sophia's on their team. And then it starts this chapter just kind of in like, oh, maybe she's not so bad.
Yeah,
and
maybe.
Then it ends with like, never mind.
She's horrible.
I take it back.
But then also, like, it also ends with us not being able to think less of the wards for having Shadowstalker on their team.
Because everyone else doesn't like her either. So.
Oh, yeah. They all have a lot of concerns about her.
Oh, yeah. This is not... This is an upper management problem going on here, not a wards problem. But anyway, that's where the Weld chapter ends. And you can see why I had a lot of notes, because that was a lot of things we went over, and that was chapter 1. And there are like 6 chapters. So, chapter 2, Flechette. We've already started talking about it. We start these chapters with Shadowstalker and Flechette meeting up, having a conversation. We get a definition onto breaker, which I think is important to point out because breaker can be one of the more confusing classifications among the ones we get. The breaker classification were generally those who had some ability to break the natural laws of the universe as far as those powers applied to them. Flechette's ability is really interesting, I must point out. Because she has a bit of a breaker, striker, just a bit of everything kind of thrown in there. Because she can, if it's an object she's touching, she can make it break a law of physics, I believe. And she has a secondary power that lets her have an intuitive understanding of angles, trajectories, and timing.
Which I feel like is super cool, but also would be super annoying.
Oh, I'm sure it is just as much of a drawback as it is a positive. She also has a grappling hook that just never runs out of stuff because it's a Tinker toy. It's something that a Tinker teammate made for her, which was very nice. But then Shadowstalker has gone ahead and has stopped, and Flechette catches up to her, and there is a woman about to be attacked in an alleyway. Flechette asks, hey, why have you stopped that? It's clear that's about to happen. And Shadowstalker's reply is, these things go smoother if the culprits are clearly committing crime when you sniff in. A man grabbed the woman's wish. She pulled back, struggled. She screamed, attacked the man only to get punched and knocked back on her ass, landing in the shallow water. And there we go. Shadowstalker leaped from the rooftop, falling at a normal speed, slowing to an almost gentle floating descent when she was partway down. You only need to wait like that if you're going to be violent, Flechette thought to herself. Why, when she has the tranquilizer bolts?
We know why.
You know why later. But I also wrote down in my notes here that I think probably just in general and not just with Sophia, that the Brockton Bay capes are used to a different level of violence than the ones from other cities might be. Because although, like, Flechette and Weld both seem like very well-adjusted individuals for people with powers. So...
And one of the things I read, because I'm doing research about traumatized kids for our other campaign, or not other campaign, the other series, our Kingmaker campaign.
Give no details, because in no way are we...
Yeah, we're not anywhere close to
out.
that being posted. But, so I've been doing some research about traumatized kids there. And one of the things that I came across when I was doing my reading that I really liked and kept coming up was your trauma is a reason and not an excuse. So yes, they are desensitized by the amount of violence they've seen and the traumatic things they've been through. Sophia's still a bitch.
Oh, absolutely. But it's not just that Sophia wants to resort to violence. We find out, like, here I actually thought that this, like, in this specific situation, most of what Sophia does is pretty reasonable. It's when we get to her perspective and later in the chapters when we have, like, Vista's point of view that we really see the bad person in Shadowstalker come out. This is what I mean by how this is structured to, like, gently float you into Sophia being an awful human being.
Yeah, because it pulls you back a little bit, and you're like, maybe.
Maybe. I don't...
No.
You don't go full in. But, I mean, these are two very good capes, so they handle a bunch of street thugs relatively easily. But then the woman gets up and starts trying to, like, seriously injure, if not murder, one of the men. And Flechette tries to stop the woman, saying, no, this isn't right, you're better than this, you have to be. Not entirely to the woman, she spoke, both at Shadowstalker and the woman. And Shadowstalker doesn't move to stop her or help Flechette in stopping her. I'm on her side, to be honest. And we get a little more into the very, very worrying things about Shadowstalker. Times like this, where cop, judge, jury, and if it really comes down to it, executioner, we're the ones with the power.
That makes me deeply uncomfy.
Oh, yes. And that makes Flechette be uncomfy, too, because she said she'd given the other girl the benefit of the doubt. Maybe Shadowstalker had some unresolved issues. Maybe it had been a rough week. But for now, she needed to calm down and wait long enough to think more objectively about what had happened. Then she'd decide whether or not to tell her new team leader. But the chapter actually ends on a relatively positive note, because Flechette goes out and checks on Parian. They had a little interaction in Arc 8, but it wasn't Taylor's focus, so it wasn't our focus. And she went back to check on her. And it was just very lovely.
It was cute and kind of heartwarming, and I'm pretty sure they're around the same age, so I ship it. But
I did write down here, because at first Kidwin briefs her on who Parian is, and they have a whole conversation, but it ends with, so you don't know exactly what happened, and I'm going to go in blind. She's harmless, though, this Parian. No one's harmless at a time like this, Flechette, Kidwin replied. Kidwin is saying this! We're making fun of this doofus with this hoverboard and name when he first appeared. And now it just makes me sad.
Like,
you're gonna hear that a lot, because the following chapters all, like, progressively made me feel more and more negative emotions. Like, Weld, I felt some serious secondhand embarrassment, but I was still like, okay, he seems confident, he'll probably adjust in time. Like, it was a bad first impression, but he seems well adjusted enough that he'll handle it.
Yeah. And he also, like,
And Flechette is just a lovely person. I really liked her.
I like her too.
I wrote in my notes, finally, a person with a crossbow that I can like.
Yeah, crossbows are cool.
Crossbows are cool.
I was genuinely disappointed. I was like, the one person with, like, a cool weapon is, like, the biggest jerk. But
yeah, but the Flechette and Parian have very nice interaction. They've exchanged phone numbers. Flechette offers to bring Parian supplies, and we actually see the payoff to that later, where she does do that. And Parian is our first real rogue that we meet. They exchange real identities. Flechette's real name is Lily, and Perion's name is Saba.
Which was a big balls move.
This is their second meeting, and it kind of, I think we're so used to the paranoia of Taylor and villain life and living in Brockton Bay in this story that this seems like, I actually, while reading this, I was like, Flechette, no, don't do that! I know it's a nice thing, but don't do that!
Oh, I was sitting there going, yay!
But after, I was like, oh, that was actually really sweet. And, like, maybe this is what normal people are like outside of the villains of Brockton Bay.
And I understand, like, Clockblocker would probably, like, never, at least not in the city, because he has family in the city. But, like, I feel like if I was in Flechette's position, where I was in a totally different city, and I was trying to make, like, a real alliance with this person, like, maybe.
And we already know Perrin is a rogue, basically to advertise the fact that she's a fashion major. Because she makes things.
Oh, it would be so freaking useful as a fashion major.
Yeah. But the exchange goes lovely. Nothing seems amiss later when we check on them. Oh, they're so pleasantly optimistic in their relationship. Next chapter, we move to the words we've met before. 9.B3, clock blocker. In my notes, I wrote the chapter in which I feel even more bad for this person. Even worse for this person. But it starts with a recorded lecture for the Parahuman University class. Clock blocker thinks it's a waste of time. I think we learned some interesting things.
Yeah, but he probably knew these things, so.
Maybe, but they are also, like, it's a class he's taking, so. But I wrote down in my notes, the fact that he thinks it's a waste of time, not because he finds the information that could be, like, he doesn't care, but because he thinks it's a waste of time because they're doing this while they're on the clock. And he thinks it's something they should be doing in their off time instead. And instead they should be overworking themselves to the bone, dying and traumatizing themselves. The one mission they go on that we see, like the one mission all of them go on, is horrific.
Yay, murder!
But I wrote that this is a classic sign of the trauma that these kids have undergone, because if you're feeling like not direct, that everything you're doing should be directed toward the thing that is like the object of your trauma there, and that anything outside of it is a waste of time, and it's making him feel irritated and angry and helpless, which is making him feel more irritated and angry.
And helpless.
Yeah, but it's a never-ending cycle. Luckily, the wards have safety nets in being friends with each other, having access to a team therapist, and other lovely things that certain other groups of teenage capes we know of don't have.
Oh, they could use a therapist really badly.
Oh, so badly. Therapy is very important. But we learned some interesting things about powers here, but the one I wanted to draw attention to is multi-triggers. Another pattern we'll be exploring is the apparent effect of multiple trigger events occurring at the same time and place. There's a very strong correlation between coinciding trigger events and individuals displaying 3 or more powers rather than 1 or 2 predominant ones. And then Kid Win interrupts and goes, "Hey, Flechette," Kid Win called across the room. "You've got a bunch of powers, right?" She turned in her seat. "Sure. Anyone else get powers the same time you did?" "Not that I know of." "Could someone nearby have gotten their powers without you knowing? Way things played out? Did any capes show up at the same time as you?" Flechette frowned. "Yeah, a rather persistent villain." "We're thinking about," Wald turned around. "Critical thinking and applying this stuff is good, but let's not forget the lecture. Or the other people in the classroom." Is he trying to get people to dislike him? Clockblocker wondered.
I don't like Weld in that moment. Like, I understand you're watching a video.
What we know of him, he is a rule follower.
But I understand
And
you're watching a video.
we see later in the chapter that it continues to be to his detriment. Perpetually, both in his interactions with Clockblocker and how he deals with the travelers later on.
Yeah.
But
I feel like that was like such a good. They were using the class.
yeah, they were
learning.
that was an instant application of the power. And I was like, you interrupted that? That was like about to be a real revelation for the shit, and you stopped that?
Like that would have been a really good
This is what the class is for.
Lecture, in an actual lecture, if a student brought that up, the lecturer would have stopped.
But I think that's a good, like, the way our thoughts change of a character when we're outside of their perspective is really important.
Yeah.
As well, we're in Wells' perspective, we're like, oh, he's thinking things through. He seems like he'll be socially competent. And in this chapter, we're just like, oh, you big dumb goof. Stop.
Oh, a whole face palm.
You're goofing this up for yourself.
Ugh. It hurts. It feels
it's
very
actually very
teacher's
smart,
pet.
and we do see this later, but like
It feels very teacher's pet. And it hurts. Stings me in my soul.
We do have to keep in mind that his literal only memories are being in the PRT. As in case 53, so maybe that has something to do with it.
There's a teacher's pet thing going on there.
Glory Girl is in the room. She is here because her team is talking about closing down, and so she's come to check out the wards and basically see if she wants to become a probationary member. Clockblocker gets a phone call from his mom, gets a text, then calls his mom and talks about dad is dying from leukemia. And he offers to try to like use his powers to see if he could help anything, because he can freeze time for a certain amount of time if it's like an emergency.
Freeze his dad.
And it's like, and I can't do anything there, and it's just another layer of helplessness that adds to like all the things going on that is making Clockblocker just irritable in other chapters and other events. And he does say, like, he fully unhinges his jaw and puts his foot in his mouth later in this chapter. So he brings Glory Girl out and is trying to like not be awkward about it, but is definitely like, as soon as he gets Glory Girl, my first thought was, okay, so he's asking Pennessy to see if Calciara is dead, right? That was my first thought. And clearly, like, he was leading up to it, and Glory Girl was like, I'll ask her, before he even really got out the question. But I mean, no promises, but I'll ask, which is a nice response.
Yeah. I have a feeling it's going to be a no, which is going to be painful.
Yeah. Amy's probably really busy right now.
And she also, like, already set, like, ground rules that she just doesn't do that because she'll run herself ragged if she starts doing it.
Yeah.
So
she's probably busy enough with the state of Brockton Bay. But Vista comes out to joining them, and Clockblocker says something he doesn't mean to Vista, saying, oh, she's trying to replace Galliot and stuff like that. And she runs off upset. We found out that he's apparently the one that convinced Shadowstalker to play nice, and that's why Shadowstalker has been relatively humane the first couple times we saw her.
And that's our first step into...
And in my... I don't know. Because you historically have not liked Glory Girl.
She seems a lot more okay.
Considering her boyfriend just died.
And she was so freaking understanding.
Her team's closing down, and a bunch... we didn't go through this, but a bunch of other people from New Wave died.
Oh, yeah. So, like, her entire life is dissolving, and she seems relatively calm.
I really like Clockblocker's description of feeling totally not forgiven when Glory Girl says, oh, yes, I'll give you a pass here if you go apologize to Vista, and that means being nicer to Weld, giving him a chance, making some concessions, getting your act together. It's like, I feel like I am trapped in a cage with a jungle cat.
Yeah, one wrong move, dude.
It was nice. And then And we go to Vista's interaction with Clockblocker about Galliot. And Vista says, I knew I didn't have a chance with him. He was way older, he was rich, handsome, he was dating Glory Girl, or they were just getting over a breakup, or he was starting to patch things up with her for the millionth time. There was never a good time to talk to him one-on-one, unless we were out on patrol, and I don't know what I would have said. There had been a chance. Vista had a crush on Galliot, and in my notes I said again, this chapter is just making me sad.
Well, I mean, and we knew Vista had a crush on Galliot.
I mean, yeah, because Galliot knew. Because he had emotion-sensing powers, so of course he knew. But we also, I don't remember if we had their real names. I think we did from the Wars chapter interlude, but Vista's real name is Missy, and Clockblocker's is Dennis. And Dennis apologizes to Vista. It was shitty of me to snap at you for doing what he would do. Glory Girl said I should let the grudge toward Weld go, partially for you, and she's right. You're right. I am angry at the pointlessness of what's still happening out there. I get frustrated and angry when I'm here because I feel like I should be out on the streets. I get pissed off when I'm out on patrol because I feel like I should be with my family. But when I'm with my family, I feel frustrated and helpless because I can't do anything there. I was taking out on the new guy when he probably doesn't deserve it. And Dennis here is our case to see how trauma changes people over time. Because, as Vista says, I miss the old Dennis, the guy who picked a sort of rude code name and announced himself in front of the news so Piggy and the others in charge couldn't make him change it. Because it was funny, because he liked pushing the limits, and because he saw all this as something fun. The new Dennis is so angry. Now I guess I get why. Can't see the pouty faces we're both making, but we're making pouty faces.
It hurts really bad.
You know how I said I felt bad for Clockblocker when he got attacked by Skinner? I feel bad for him for a lot of other reasons now.
Yeah. I can't even imagine, there's a lot going on there.
I feel like there's a lot to unpack with each of these words. There's a lot. But class is canceled because there's been trouble. This trouble happens to be a series of horrifically mutilated corpses, dead bodies, people that have been murdered. On each of the 3 interior walls of an older building was a body 20 feet above the ground. Each had received a different kind of treatment. To their left was a corpse that had been flayed, the gender no longer identifiable. Directly opposite their group was a corpse of an obese woman, charred black. Completing the scene was the body of what appeared to be a homeless man, or one of the people who'd been rendered homeless by the recent disaster, judging by the layers of clothing he wore. His limbs had been severed at each joint, then reconnected, so each joint was a short, foot-long length of chain. Nails placed through the chain kept him positioned, head hanging a macabre puppet of an overlong body. The chains jangled and swung in the wind. I wrote in my notes, if these kids weren't traumatized before, they are now!
Yup. I felt a little bit sick reading that. I was like, okay, ew. Okay,
I would like to talk that Wildbow is really good at writing body horror. It is one of the things he will come to be known for as we read through more and more of this work and other works of his eventually. One of his books, it is Twig, is completely revolving around that idea. I'm very used to his style of writing. So this didn't even strike me as particularly graphic.
I just don't understand.
It's so bad.
I have a really active imagination and you have a really active imagination, so did you not sit there and picture it?
Oh, no, I did. I've read this before. Okay. I knew it was coming. So I wasn't, shocked by the display, because it's a sudden tone shift. It's a class and we're at a crime scene. And they comment on how these people were killed in broad daylight. Later we find out that one of them was still alive when the travelers arrived on the scene. Man had his limbs cut off. Which, oh god. That's horrifying. But the travelers are there. And Trickster comes around a corner and goes, pardon the cliche, but this isn't what it looks like. And Walt's like, no, I totally believe you. This doesn't match your MO at all. Which what we know about them, that's true. This doesn't match their MO at all.
Yeah. You're
But
a different type of criminal.
He still refuses to let them go. Which means there's a pointless fight happening. A pointless fight just because they're heroes and villains. I think it's the most pointless fight we've seen in the series.
And I really don't I like Weld, but that's not how it works here.
Yeah, I understand why the fight happens, but it's not how Brockton Bay really functions. It might be how Boston functions, but it's not how Brockton Bay functions. Or else Brockton Bay wouldn't function if you fought every villain you saw.
God.
Especially because the Travelers are on that list of villain lists. Low priority.
Yeah.
They're not your big guns. They're like a bunch of rapscallions. They're not murderers.
Premises or murderers. They're like,
you have bigger problems.
like the 3 bodies.
Save your resources. Even he's pointing it out. Even Trickster points it out. Let us go. Whatever happened here, it deserves your full attention. You should be trying to find and capture the real criminals. This guy here was still arrived when we arrived. But Weld is a person that sticks to protocol, so they fight for actually no reason.
And Vista gets hurt.
Yes, but I'd like to talk about this fight, because some parts made me chuckle a little. Because we see, as soon as the fight starts, we see immediately how annoying Trickster's powers are to deal with. And at first in this fight, because this bleeds into the next chapter, which is from Kidwin's perspective, it goes relatively well for the most part because the Travelers are holding back a lot. For multiple reasons. Like, we'll find out later that once Trickster finds out that the wards can't do anything to preserve the integrity of the crime scene, he stops caring about preserving the integrity of the crime scene and uses the actual corpses to teleport people around. In the beginning of the fight, he doesn't do that because he's still trying to, because the Travelers here are still trying to talk them down and run away. And, like, we know a lot about the Travelers' abilities. Some of them are straight up deadly, but they're, like, giving warnings and holding back very specifically so they don't murder these people. So, Clockblocker's summation of Trickster's powers is really fucking annoying. Which I think sums it up oddly. But I want to read the last 2 paragraphs of Clockblocker's chapter. Because not only did it make me sad, but because in this pointless fight, he felt oddly calm as he squared off against the villains with some of the highest power ratings in Brockton Bay beneath the grim display of the 3 hanging corpses. He reached into the slot of the armor at his side and withdrew 2 sheets of paper. Moving his thumbs in one direction, he fanned out the paper, holding them like anyone else might hold a pair of knives. He realized what it was, this calm. Whatever else it was, this fight was a refuge from the feeling that had plagued him since the fight with Leviathan ended. The feeling that he was always in the wrong place, doing the wrong thing, at the wrong time, in the face of a city in crisis and a dying father. This, right here, was where he was needed.
Go take a nap, baby boy. I'm so sorry.
Can wards have psych leave, please? Because these kids all need psych leave.
They need, like, mandatory psych leave.
Yeah, they need non-optional psych leave.
I feel like right now wouldn't even be in the cards.
Yeah, no, they just all become vigilantes.
Yeah. And I feel like even as an organization, the PRT wouldn't.
But I'd like to address, before we move on to Kid's Twins chapter, that we made fun of Kidwin a lot.
Oh, we did.
Mercilessly, in fact. And I think that's what you were supposed to, like, that was what your summation of Kidwin was supposed to be before this chapter. And it opens in the perfect way to, like, knock you off kilter. I'm a tinker. I'm supposed to be smart. So how can I been so stupid? And you know what this chapter does, Cassidy? Care to take a guess? to me and my emotions. Do you know what it does?
It hurts.
It makes me sad, yeah!
It makes me sad.
So yeah, Kidwin is also surprisingly sad, considering his name. So Kidwin, despite Kidwin perpetually putting himself down over the course of this chapter, he actually does a considerable amount, both in this fight and later on. Like, he accomplishes quite a bit.
Just got a self-esteem problem, sweetheart.
He's just got a self-esteem. He takes down Genesis, one of the members of the team, and he is the one to prioritize saving Vista later on, so makes some good decisions. But he talks about, this is sort of the summation of how he thinks about himself. He was dumb, easily distracted, prone to leaving his projects unfinished, and it was moments like this that this knowledge hit him particularly hard. His dad had made him get tested, and the doctors had labeled him with ADD and dyscalculia. He held the opinion that the ADD diagnosis was way overused. He liked to think that he was just a daydreamer, prone to getting lost in his thoughts. The dyscalculia was something concrete that he couldn't deny or explain away. He couldn't keep numbers in his head, couldn't make the most basic intuitive leaps or connections with them.
Just saying.
That must make being a tinker very hard.
Yeah, and like, just for anyone listening, having a learning disorder does not make you stupid. It means you have to learn differently. And maybe it's a little bit more difficult, but you're not stupid.
Yeah, Kidwin's the poster child of this, though, because he does the most in the fight and is really intelligent with a lot of the things he does later in this chapter. Like, he is the first one after the fight ends and they have some time to look over the body. That makes the connection between the number of bodies and the fact that the Slaughterhouse 9 are in town.
Yeah.
Foreshadowing.
But I can't even, I feel like that would be, the ultimate sucky suck. Like, if you had, some sort of reading ability and you were dyslexic.
You have an actual superpower, and you have just something holding you back from using it to its fullest potential. Must be really saddening and disheartening. But they make the connection between the 9 bodies, each for a different killer, the Slaughterhouse 9. We get some more information on them from Flechette. Wouldn't be the first time they've arrived at a location in the wake of an Endbringer attack. They seem to be attracted to chaos and disarray. Yay! This is just what Brockton Bay needed.
A couple of 9 serial killers.
Lovely. Woo!
Which, I don't know much about criminal psychology. That's, your thing. Is it, there's, not even real cases of serial killers grouping up, right?
I mean, that's not necessarily true. Lots of serial killers have had partners in crime, or other people they commit crimes with. And there is such a thing, I hate to disappoint you, as the Yakuza and the Mafia and organized crime, where people like that band together and trade information and things like that. I do think the Slaughterhouse 9 are unique to Worm in their presentation and character. They are the rogues gallery trope from other media, like the Injustice League from DC, but taken to the logical extreme.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying. Of course, I know there's organized crime and stuff, but these seem
there's
9.
There's no organized crime with superpowers.
Yeah, but these seem 9 straight up psychos.
Yeah, well, we will find out more about them in later arcs, but for now, this is what we get on them, and they're already terrifying. But Kidwin gets assigned recruiting duty on Chariot, the person we learned about in the first chapter, the Tinker. And this is where we see the social intelligence of Kidwin come into play. Because Kidwin is, really good at recruiting. Reads this kid like a book. Plays the mother up, so the mother is, tactfully moves the mother out of the conversation. So he's really just talking to conversation between him and the kid. and then realizes that something is wrong with how Chariot is acting, and finds out that he's being sent as a mole. For Coil, we find out later. Definitely for Coil. This is a Coil. Out of all the villains in Brockton Bay, only Coil would send spies at some place. That's his MO.
Yeah. And you gotta have some pride, especially for, I believe it was also in this chapter where Piggy was like, oh yes, we've got some information. That's the next thing?
That's the
Next chapter?
And we have a lot of like setup payoffs in the next, it's something is set up in the previous chapter and then paid off in the next one. Or in the following of the arc. So Kidwin's discovery of this, he calls the meeting, but we don't actually see the meeting until Vista's chapter 9.7.
Yeah.
But Vista's chapter opens up with Flechette and Vista patrolling, meeting up with Parian to deliver supplies, and we see another cute Parian and Flechette interaction. And Kidwin has this meeting and drops this revelation, and he gets a good job from Director Pidgeot. So
I really liked the definitely obtained legally, correct? Yeah. Definitely legally.
Of course, Kidwin grinned in a way that left no doubt for anyone present that he was lying through his teeth.
Legally, right? Sure.
Yeah. And some of the things that Vista says, because she's the youngest member on the team, not only make me sad, but make me, like, very concerned for her. One of the things she says, what we do is dangerous. Sometimes we die. I don't see why I should worry about what happens 5 years from now when I might not even be here. Because Vista's trauma manifests through nihilism. Isn't that fun?
Jesus, everyone on this one.
So, yeah, Vista's trauma manifests through nihilism and fatalism. Which is a real way for the 13-year-old's trauma to manifest.
He's 13! He just needs a hug! And needs to be obsessed with, like, a really crappy lip gloss or something like that. Like a normal 13-year-old.
Yeah, but Flechette catches on and reports this to Weld, and Weld has a pretty good way of helping with that problem later. But we go through this is where we find out that the PRT knows they've been infiltrated by Coil. This made me simultaneously hopeful and terrified.
Oh yeah, because they don't really know what
Coil's power is. So they think they're playing Coil, but he's got 2 timelines in the bank. So you could, as a spy, like, you could do something really risky in one timeline and get that information to Coil, and then he could delete the timeline and still have the information, and you'd be fine. And this could go on forever. But also, I think that Coil is arrogant and very overconfident in his plan's success. And I think that seeing the fact that his success isn't as guaranteed as he might think it is nice. Even seeing that the PRT does know and is at least trying makes me feel a little better.
I get the feeling that the PRT doesn't think Coil is as big a deal. They're like,
Which is, don't underestimate the chess master, please.
Literally a chess master. You gave him that
classification. Please. Dragon's Tech discovered these guys, his infiltrators, and so they've been giving them bad or misleading information. Vista is dismissed, has a conversation. I think it goes to clean up from her patrol, and thinks about that one time that she got stabbed by Hookwolf and patched herself up in the shower and didn't tell anyone because she didn't want to be seen as weak.
I would be so pissed if I was one of her teammates and found that out.
Oh my god. Yes, I was pissed, and I'm not her teammate, I'm the reader. I was like, no, Vista!
But also, as an athlete, have been there, have done that.
I mean,
hold
yes,
something
and
or
also
pop something.
one of her big things is she doesn't want to be treated as a child, as she is the youngest member of the team, and so that's why she did that. She didn't want to have display a sign of weakness that would have been seen as being a kid. But then the kid Wynn's name is Chris. I'm just putting in their real names when we learn them. And Weld has a heart-to-heart with Vista.
It was so sweet.
Tells him she'd make a good team heart because she notes that she's stepping up unconsciously to replace Galliant, as Clock Blocker is kind of stepping up to replace Aegis. And he talks about, like, it's good to let yourself cry to do that stuff, because he says, you think I've never cried, looking like I do, facing the disappointments and frustrations I have. Maybe it's self-serving to think so, but I think it takes a kind of strength to let yourself face your emotions like that.
Yes.
And we see it is a strength, and then we see the epitome of weakness, Sophia.
Weakness. Sophia.
If we're defining by Weld's definition of strength, the epitome of weakness.
Unable to deal with her freaking emotions.
Oh yeah, and calls Vista a crybaby. She hates when other people show weakness. But Vista responds with the most painful way she could have, expressing pity.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
I feel so bad for you. Why don't you should just explain to me what's wrong? I pity you. I pity you. And then Shadowstalker attacks her and then storms off.
It absolutely shows that Vista made the right move.
Oh, yes.
The perfect move.
The 4D chest. Didn't even realize it. The perfect move, yes. And then we got a Shadowstalker's interlude.
Oh yes, Shadowstalker.
Usually interludes make me feel like I like a person. They're good for, like, changing my opinion on them or, like, giving us a different perspective. That's not what happened here.
I was holding out hope. I was
because it's sort of been, like, easing us in, or, like, seems almost like it's building up to a character revelation. Instead, it's building up to the reveal of how Sophia's mindset might be one of the most villainous mindsets we've seen in the story so far.
Yeah.
Because she thinks the world in terms of predator and prey, of those with power and those without it, which is so dangerous. Also, it's just, I have some notes here. So the victim personality did have a habit of pissing her off, but she could let them be so long as the person or people in question stayed out of sight, out of mind, accepting their place without fight or fanfare. There were some predators she could admit that were even useful. Emma came to mind. The girl went a long way toward making life out of costume tolerable. There was Director Pidgeot, who had kept her out of jail this far because she fit into the woman's overarching agenda of PR and the illusion of a working system. And man, God.
That pisses me off so deeply.
We have so much. But we do know from this chapter that Taylor's summation of her bullies' relationships with one another is so very, very wrong. Because in Taylor's mind, Emma is the leader of that bully pack. We know that's not true.
No.
I just want to point out that sometime later in this chapter, Sophia calls Emma, sits on the phone with her, not saying anything for a really long time, and Emma just sits there and doesn't say anything as well. Sophia has, like, an internal villainous monologue. Doesn't say a word, just waits for Sophia to come back in.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I feel like I'm starting to feel a little scared for Emma.
Yeah, because this is a dangerous person she's made friends with.
And what if she feels, like, trapped or stuck or scared?
Also know now why Emma was at that PRT event. It wasn't because Emma's dad had gotten her in.
Mm-hmm.
It was because Sophia had gotten her in. One of the many foreshadowing drops we got at Shadowstalker's identity.
Well, and then also Shadowstalker so harshly handling Taylor in the mall situation.
Yep. But there is this one quote in her conversation with Emma that concerned me. I've killed people, and then I washed the blood off my hands and went to school and acted normal the next day.
Yeah. I really do think that Emma feels scared to not be friends with Sophia.
Oh, wouldn't you? Like, you don't have powers in this situation.
Personally, I have a death wish, so
but
like
you
probably
don't
not.
have powers in this situation. Imagine you're a sane
Yeah.
person in this situation. You don't have powers. Your friend does have superpowers, and your friend admits to having murdered people and act like it was fine the next day.
I'd be scared, but like, and I feel I'm scared for Emma. I'm scared for Sophia's friends.
But during this conversation, she hangs up with Emma because she sees something upon approaching the vans that are approaching cargo. She sees Skitter. And she chases after Skitter. I would like to point out, almost like tries to murder Skitter with with the
absolutely bolt. Is attempting murder.
And the only reason that didn't happen is because Taylor made her costume out of spider silk,
which
couldn't be cut. Again, that's too common in Clutch. But and the arc ends with Taylor sort of crouching down in front of Sophia and going, "Things are different now." And when they tie her up with extension cords, show that this was a totally pre-planned excursion, and cart her away. They also have a new member, Imp. Bets on who that is?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I didn't read into it very far. I probably should have, but like...
New person, someone we haven't met before, or someone we have?
I'm thinking maybe the girl from Coyle's hideout place, but I'm also thinking probably not, because there was a reason she was being hidden, and Noelle. I doubt it.
Also, Noelle is an adult.
Yeah, then I have no...
Doesn't fit into our teen supervillain theme.
Yeah, I have no idea.
Okay. But because we really didn't interact with our Undersiders at all this arc, things are going to be different in our summary. But first, or we go over characters, but first, any overarching thoughts you had about this arc?
Well, I do think it was like really interesting the way that Wildbow set this all up, and definitely the whole Sophia thing did throw me for a loop. We've been talking about, he was very much like, maybe you're wrong about Sophia, and you're like, maybe I am wrong, and then you're like, no, I'm not at all, what the hell? And once again, it brings me back to the whole trauma's a reason, not an excuse. So Sophia, knock it the fuck off, please. We can just, so like everyone can be a little bit healthier and we can just move on.
Okay. But instead of going over the members of the Undersiders and your opinions on them, we're going to go one by one through the members of the Lords we met.
Oh, that's a pretty long list, actually.
It's like 7 people.
Longer than the 4.
Yes. Well, that list is going to increase because we're going to go over Imp next arc, too, and add her to the thing. So it'll be 5. So this is closer, actually. Weld.
I genuinely feel bad for this kid. He is a teacher's pet, but he doesn't know what the fuck he's doing, and no one's helping him out. They're just expecting him to figure it out. Like, no.
Flechette.
Oh, I actually really love her so far. I'm sure there's downfalls to her character that we're probably going to get to see, but so far she seems really well adjusted and like, nice.
Clock blocker.
Just sad sigh. It's just a sad sigh.
Yeah, I feel like we've expressed our opinions on Clock blocker pretty vocally every time he's come up in the story. So, Kid Win.
Kind of a sad sigh, but also go you, boo. And it's a confidence thing. Don't trick yourself. It's just a confidence thing. You're doing great.
Vista.
Ooh. Girly. You need a hug and a couple days off. I I can't even imagine trying to make it work in that team setting, being the youngest, but probably one of the most powerful people on that team.
And Shadow Stalker.
Blech.
Yeah, that kind of sums it up, doesn't it?
Yeah. Just a
Next
gag,
time on Anecdotal Adventures, we will be reading Arc 10, Parasite. Any predictions for what they kidnap Shadow Stalker for?
I don't know, but I'm excited. I hope that Taylor gets. I'm not usually one that's like beat her the F up. 1 or 2 swings, just 1 or 2.
Just 1 or 2.
Just 1 or 2.
Just 1 or 2.
Yeah.
Okay.
Stay fun, party people. Bye-bye.
See you next time. Anecdotal Adventures Reads Worm. I've been your host, Ashley, and this has been my co-host,
Cassidy.
We will see you all next time.